On tonight's programme, Mysteries from the Future. Will we ever grow a baby in an artificial womb? Could a course of injections control criminal behaviour and the people who believe they'll come back from the dead? Over the last 100 years, science and technology have enabled virtually every aspect of our lives to change fundamentally. But how will things change in the future? For this programme, we've asked leading scientists to predict what developments they might expect to see in the next 100 years. From their predictions, we've created fictional dramas to illustrate just how many complex choices we'll be facing in the 21st century. Our first story is set in London in the year 2050, when crime will still be with us, but our methods of dealing with it might be very different.
Yeah, he's off again. God knows what he's up to. No, he don't listen to no one. He's gonna do something. I don't know. I don't know. That look, I know it. I've seen it before. No, I can't call the police, not my own brother. I don't know what to do. I can't take this no more.
They're on 16. Get a team down there now. Come on, show me your face. Come on. Gotcha. Hello, Lee. You've done it this time.
Why, Lee? Why?
What's wrong with you? For God's sake, say something. Talk to me.
Lee. I'm your sister.
Good morning. Lee Robert Kirby. At your trial, you pleaded guilty to causing serious injury in entirely unprovoked circumstances. In reaching our decision, we have taken your past into consideration and consulted the victim of your most recent assault. In the 18 years you have been on this planet, you have been a supreme menace to society. You committed arson at 10 and graduated to violent robbery. When you were 15, based on electronic grievous bodily harm and sentence. Now you have offended again, this time nearly killing a man. You are sentenced to 15 years imprisonment, no parole, no early release. However, we can offer you an alternative. The state will set aside this sentence if you agree to a course of medication to reduce your aggressive tendencies.
I would predict that we will have drugs that could be administered to a person with, say, aggressive behavior, that would focus specifically on the parts of the brain where that behavior arises and switch off the genes that allow those nerve cells to talk to each other to initiate such aggressive behavior. We already have experiments in experimental animals where we can make injections of this material directly into the place in the brain that we want to influence and, for example, turn off becoming anxious. We can make these injections, the genes are switched off, and now the animal can be placed in what would normally be a very stressful, novel environment, and they explore it like it was their native home.
I've appointed Councillor Freeman to give you as much information and advice as you need. You must make your decision within the next 24 hours. Thank you.
Based on what we know today and projecting that, say, 50 years from now, Lee would have to undergo a series of injections just in order to keep the genes switched off that would be controlling the behavioral aggression.
But I don't understand.
Well, the aim is to bring Lee into line with normal behavior, to make him more like you and me. It's a very new treatment. His progress is going to be regularly monitored.
And you've tried it out on other offenders, right?
Lee will be one of the first.
One of the first. Right. What do you think he is, a lab rat or something? This is unbelievable.
Annie, I'm just here to give you information. Remember, you do still have a choice. Lee could simply serve his time.
And what about the side effects? What happens to the rest of him? You're messing with someone's brain, someone's personality.
Drugs have been used for years to control and modify behavior.
Yeah. And they all have side effects. Now, what exactly are the side effects of switching off Lee's violent genes, whatever it is you're going to do?
It seems to me very unlikely that influencing the kinds of gene switches that we're talking about would have adverse effects on learning, memory, ordinary language development. It might dampen emotions, so that's a potential danger.
Let's think of the worst case scenario. Well, perhaps one of the worst things is he might turn out to be like these poor people that had surgery in the 1950s when they had lobotomies and so on. Or you might have deprived him of emotions altogether, so he's a kind of zombie. Or perhaps one might modify something other than emotions, his learning and memory, for example, which might also be dealt with by those particular areas of the brain.
So what would you do then, if you were me?
If I had to be the practitioner who would decide, should we do this to my son, let's say, and if there were no other treatments available, and this would restore my son to a happy and productive life and is reversible, then I would advocate it.
To anyone contemplating this treatment, I'd say think very carefully, because what you'll be playing around with is your mind. Now, your mind is unique to you, and it's made up of all these different brain connections. And if you were tampering with that, hoping to influence just one behavior, what you'd risk is tampering with your whole personality. You might be blowing your mind, literally.
But if you're thinking about how it's going to affect your personality, you have to consider the alternative. How's being locked up for the next 15 years going to affect your personality?
Going to prison is one thing, Lee. But messing with your mind. Whatever they do, you ain't going to be the same.
It's your decision, Lee. Think about it.
I'll do it.
there are huge ethical problems with this treatment, particularly because what you're doing is you are limiting someone's behavioral repertoire, which is the capacity to be aggressive, and you're doing that without some kind of understanding of the context in which that person lives. It might well be that Lee is aggressive because it has survival value in the particular area that he lives in. So if you then took away his ability to be aggressive and threw him back in that self-same environment, he might well be dead in a few weeks' time.
Hi!
There is one group of people whose faith in the science of the future is so strong that they're prepared to do something that most of us would consider bizarre, or at worst, even grotesque. They're involved in a controversial experiment which they hope will eventually guarantee them a longer life. But to take part in this experiment, there is one absolute requirement. First, they have to die. This man is going to be frozen to minus 196 degrees Celsius after he dies. The process is called cryonic suspension.
I'm involved in cryonics because I think it will be possible one day to stop and even reverse the aging process. When I die, I'll be frozen. It may not be perfect, but it's better than the alternative, which isn't to be frozen at all. Being frozen gives me an option of a hugely extended lifespan. If I'm not frozen, I don't get any option.
When Garrett dies, his body will be packed in ice, injected with a form of human antifreeze, and flown here to the Alcor Life Extension Foundation in Phoenix, Arizona. He won't be alone. All of the people in these photographs have already been cryonised. They're kept in these containers behind me called dewars, filled with liquid nitrogen. Now, each one of these vessels can hold up to 4 complete bodies. Today, 35 people are held in this room, suspended until such a time, if ever, that science finds a way to bring them back to life. This film is a 1960s reconstruction of a model being prepared for the freezing process. But the treatment used in the early days allowed ice crystals to form in the cells, which destroyed the tissue. Brian Schock from Alcor believes they may have found a way around this particular problem.
Basically what we're doing right now is running a kind of antifreeze solution through a person's veins and arteries to get the antifreeze into the cells and around the cells to prevent the formation of ice crystals that are very damaging.
However, the antifreeze or cryoprotectant causes another problem because it's poisonous. In spite of this, Brian remains confident.
There's no way to say for certain when we will revive our first cryonics patient. The guesses vary from about 50 years to 150 years, but at the rate things are developing now, it could surprise us. It could be much closer to 50.
Not surprisingly, cryonics has many critics who say the technical problems are insurmountable. Those bodies which were frozen using the early techniques have had their cells destroyed simply by the freezing process itself. And those injected with human antifreeze have had so much added to stop ice crystals from forming that their cells have effectively been poisoned. So it's at this point that we need to take a giant leap into the world of scientific speculation. What if, one day, scientists could overcome these seemingly impossible problems? How might that happen? Some scientists are predicting that in the future, a process called nanotechnology may become commonplace. This is a manufacturing process which makes machines in miniature. If the current theory were to become reality, it would mean that one day computer chips and the robots that build them could be no larger than a few atoms. Ralph Merkel is a scientist who's been studying nanotechnology. How might nanotechnology help to repair the cell damage which has been caused by freezing in cryonic suspension?
Well, disease and ill health are caused largely by damage at the molecular and the cellular level. Today's surgical tools are very large and very crude at that level. In the future, with nanotechnology, we'll be able to build surgical tools that are molecular, both in their size and their precision. And one of the ideas is that when we develop these molecular machines, we could actually inject them into the human body. So you could have a fleet of very small robots circulating in your body, and for the first time we'll be able to intervene at the level where the damage actually occurs and reverse it very directly. I'd hazard a very ballpark guess that we might be able to reverse freezing injury sometime in the middle of the next century.
Until recently, cryonics was only really discussed by those signing up to the idea. But all that changed when one man went to court. Thomas Donaldson doesn't want to wait to die naturally. He believes in the science of the future, and he wants the right to be frozen now. Thomas Donaldson has a brain tumour, but is currently in remission. However, should the tumour come back, he wants to be cryonised before he dies to prevent the tumour from destroying his brain.
One of the problems with brain tumours is that they can destroy you before you are considered to be legally dead. If I was frozen after I'd been declared dead, you know, it would have meant nothing at all. I would not have been able to be brought back because my brain would have been destroyed.
Thomas took his case to court and was defended by Chris Ashworth.
The outcome of the case, of course, is that Thomas Donaldson lost, but if there were a revival of a presently cryonicized person, then that would aid someone like Thomas who wanted to then go back to court yet again and say, look, it works, it's realistic, and it is not, therefore, suicide. It is simply a bridge, it's a medical bridge, if you will, to continued life.
By the time I am reawakened, problems such as cancer will be really very minor, so minor that you could probably just take a pill or something yourself and it'll all go away.
For the moment, Thomas Donaldson will have to wait, but his faith in the future remains firm. Is he right, or is it all just a completely pointless experiment? Well, for those who lived 100 years ago, something as commonplace today as a heart transplant would have been inconceivable. So, if in 100 years' time, the world of science has advanced beyond our comprehension, who knows? Maybe Thomas will prove us wrong. "20 years ago, a medical milestone was reached when the first test tube baby was born. More recently, the birth of Dolly the sheep made headlines all over the world, as Dolly is a clone of her mother. In our next film, one scientist predicts how we may soon have the technology to push back the boundaries of the beginning of life even further.
Life for a woman who can't have a baby is a continual pain. You're past mother care and you see newborn babies, you see pregnancy, and it's staring you in the face every time of the day. You only have to watch TV to see all the baby adverts, Pampers and baby foods, Heinz. It's almost unbearable.
Infertility is on the increase. There are several reasons. One of them being that sexually transmitted diseases have been becoming more common over the last few years. Also, women are putting off childbearing until a later stage of their lives, until they've got on with their careers and that they feel that they have sufficient resources to be able to look after a baby. And a woman's fertility is very dependent on her age. There's also been evidence over the last few years that men's sperm count is decreasing in number.
Now, I really want to go. You can imagine, 4 pregnant women around the same table.
That is Emma's idea of hell. No, it's a nightmare. There's been no change. I think it's just a case of keeping our spirits up, you know, not losing hope. Lucy's here. I'll call you back. Ectogenesis? What's all this about?
Ectogenesis is a process whereby a baby is both conceived and developed in an artificial environment outside the uterus. Now, it is difficult to be precise about when that could be possible, but if research was concentrated in that direction, it could be within about 25 or 30 years.
So we just fill out a form, hand over some eggs and some sperm, and 9 months later, a baby pops out of a box. Doesn't that bother you slightly?
I'll tell you what bothers me. Being told that I can't have the only thing in life that I've ever really wanted.
For those that are born without a womb, ectogenesis will be the answer.
But what about the baby? How will it be affected? What will it feel knowing that it came from some machine?
I'm extremely concerned about the use of an artificial womb. The baby might have great difficulty bonding with the mother, and that this would then extend and spread to the baby's ability to bond with everybody else.
I know we've been over this before, but maybe we're just not meant to have kids.
You listen to me, Matthew. This thing has torn our lives apart. You said it yourself, it's been 5 years of hell.
I know.
Well, do you want it to go on? 5 more years of us screaming at each other, of me feeling suicidal?
Emma, please.
I'm serious, Matthew. If we don't take this chance, that is what's going to happen. You have to realize that.
Emma?
What?
I think we should go and talk to the clinic.
What's brought this on all of a sudden?
Because you're right. This is our shot at happiness, isn't it? Our final shot. So how does it work?
The process breaks down into 3 basic stages. First is fertilization, which we do under a microscope. We select the preferred egg and the preferred sperm and effect the fertilization. 5 days later comes the implantation. This is the most difficult part, when we introduce the embryo to the artificial womb, the ectogenetic unit, and hope that it attaches itself to the artificial uterine wall. At this point, nature takes over, and it will take 3 days to know whether we've been successful. If we have been, then the next step, obviously, is gestation.
We know that couples going through the treatment find the period between the implantation of the embryos and finding out whether a pregnancy has occurred is the most stressful time of their lives. Everyone has contributed as much as they can. The couple have put everything in. The doctors and scientists have done everything that they can. But ultimately, there's still the role for nature, and that the embryo would have to implant within the unit. Otherwise, all of it could be for nothing.
I don't want it. Hello?
Hello, is that Emma?
Yes.
It's Dr. Gray here. I'm delighted to tell you that the implantation has been successful.
Oh.
The embryo is now developing normally, and you and your husband are free to drop in and visit any time.
Thank you, Dr. Gray. Thank you very much indeed. Hello, baby. Hello, the doctors have asked me to make a tape for you so that you can hear my voice while you're in your... so that you can get used to hearing your mummy's voice and your daddy's voice, because We're thinking about you all the time, even though we can't always be with you. And I come to visit you nearly every day. 24 weeks, darling.
I brought down one of my CDs for you to listen to.
Just one. You need some sort of selection.
Emma, I'm trying.
Sorry. I'm making one of those recordings. Do you want to say something?
I can't.
Just use your imagination, Matthew. Say anything.
Can't. I can't, and I'm sick of trying to pretend that all this is normal while our baby sits in some lab.
Oh, that's great. At least it'll get used to the sound of us rowing.
Well, 6 weeks to go.
I know.
I mean, you really don't have to be here every day. It's all going perfectly smoothly.
But I'm a mother.
Oh.
You all right?
Don't worry, it's just my back. It's always agony by now.
I wish I could talk about backache or my brain going soft or swollen ankles.
Yes, well, I'd kill for a pregnancy without stretch marks and 15 hours of labour.
Just think, when you're ready to give birth, you'll feel your waters break. I'll probably get an email. I already know what sex it is. I know everything about it, except I'm scared, Sophie. What if this baby doesn't feel any bond to me?
I would say to Emma, who is worried about not being able to bond with the child because she hasn't carried it, to not worry, because when a parent adopts a child, as soon as that child is placed with them, they become the mother, and all those maternal instincts will come in.
2 weeks to go, 2 weeks, and I don't know how I'm going to feel.
Nobody knows how they really feel until the baby's born. Even people who are really, well, pregnant.
Emma, Matthew, congratulations. You have a beautiful 8-pound baby boy.
It's very easy to imagine a scenario where this sort of development and this sort of knowledge could be abused. And I think it would be very important that it would only ever be used within a medical context for the alleviation of infertility.
Well, if it fell into the wrong hands, there would be the risk of baby farming, genetic engineering, the creation of a master race, a super race. I mean, it's mind-boggling and terrifying.
We're about to enter a new and brilliant age of discovery, but only time will tell whether we'll celebrate or regret our exploration into the unknown. For now, of course, it must remain a mystery. We'll be back in the autumn with our main series, so until then, goodbye.
There'll be more fast-forwarding to future technology with Carol Vorderman later in the year here on BBC One. 7 numbers could make you very rich in a minute with the lottery.